They could go in the water, so.
Oh, mine won't either. First go to the back door if it's raining out.
She will go on the paddleboard with,
You're going out there.
she'll go on the paddleboard with Caitlin, and if there's another dog that she likes, she might walk in the water.
You know what, that mountain man running, that poor guy's dog died out in the field out of me. I almost cried myself. I felt bad for him. Dog just laid down and died. Well, he was 15 or 16 years old. Never forget when I was younger, I got home from service. My dog was 15 years old or whatever. He was dying of cancer.
Jim, you have a copy
Not
of
good
it, right?
for him. So my dad and I talked it over, and Dad, them back in them days, you know, he's all called out.
I will have two
Down, shoot him or something.
extras.
But while I was in service, my little brother and little sister, they made that their dog.
Those are used, I
And
like
I'll be
crab.
damned, you
Are
know,
those
and
color?
we convinced the two of them, they were just,
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? I've got
well, the dog's gonna die because it got cancer, and the
Thank you.
vet's gonna.
I've got an extra.
Policeman will come and take
That
it, and
one's-
then
I'll leave it
take
out
to
there
the
in
vet
case
and give it a
it's-
shot.
it's probably
So we got it all over the crime.
I mean, I've read through it, I know what the color stuff
Here,
says.
the little shoot squad car pulled up, and the guy come over, and he grabbed the dog by the tail, he picked it up and threw it in the box. He says, "I'll take it down and jump and shoot it, don't worry about it."
Nice.
Oh my God, there we had a whole works all over again.
I went over to a friend's house. It was a couple years ago, and he's got all his woods behind him, and he's spraying the side of his garage like crazy, and there's just fur everywhere. He goes, I gotta get this cleaned up when my wife gets home. So I put the dog down. She didn't want me to. Here's got all these woods. So what's he do? He's got the garage, the dog, his shotgun. It's like, dude, all those woods you did it right in front of your garage.
Yeah.
Well, that thing that I talked to you with Mike and his parents,
Uh-huh.
he actually wrote a letter to the zoning
John did
guy
that.
and
He's a
got a
farm
phone
dog
call
out
today.
there, ran
Oh, yeah?
barnyard.
So I don't know how it went, but
There's a paper copy of the agenda there with the packet if you'd like.
Like $150
Yep.
to put it sleep and get rid of it, you know? So now I'll just take it home. So he took it home and he took it all back, shot it, buried it. Next morning, the police department showed up, county sheriff. Want to see his dog. Want to know what happened to it. How the hell did they know that,
Yeah.
you know?
Put it to sleep. End of the day.
5.
We've got 6 o'clock,
you ready to start?
if you're ready.
I'm ready. All right, you guys ready?
Ready?
All right. This meeting and all other meetings of this committee are open to the public. Proper notice has been posted and given to the press in accordance with Wisconsin statutes so the citizenry may be aware of the time, place, and agenda of this meeting. Roll call.
Appleby,
Here.
Gunderson,
Here.
Nadowski is not present.
I would like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes from July 15th, 2015.
So moved.
Do I second that?
Yep,
I'll second that.
if you'd like.
Well, I guess I'm the only one.
Sure.
It's just you.
Just do me. Number 4 is discussion and possible
We gotta have a
action.
vote, though.
What?
Yep,
We gotta
I'll
vote.
vote on
Gotta say all in
that
favor.
motion.
Sorry.
That's okay, it's up to you. All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
There you go.
Sorry, it's been a long day.
That's no problem.
Citizens appearance?
I'm here.
Okay.
Keith. Could I just make a statement here? Probably should say for the camera why Keith's not here. He's on National Guard duty or whatever, you know. Just so-
Yeah.
Just so that people are aware that he is National Guard duty today rather than, he's not just skipping out. Go ahead.
All right. Number 4 is discussion and possible action on ordinance related to accessory buildings and setbacks on corner lots.
Yes, this is you have a packet of information, and there's 17 pages of information, and it's coded with page 1 through 17. That's info that was presented to the ordinance committee in January of 2014, so it's a year and a half ago. And everything that was presented then is still relevant today to be considered. And some of the issues we have basically deal with corner lots. And in city ordinance, if you're looking to either build a accessory building or a garage or build onto your house, our ordinances do not have a clear one-stop shop for corner lots. There's a lot of, you have to pick from one spot on what is a front yard, and you have to go to another spot on what is an attached or detached building to add on. You have to go to another spot to talk about attached or detached on a corner lot. So there's a lot of pieces, and so when it comes to somebody looking to build on a corner lot, there's a lot of jumping around. There's nothing that's real clear. So that's one of the main issues that we have right away. From there, our ordinances define a front yard as any yard that butts up on a street. And so on a corner lot, our ordinances say that you would have your yard between your house and the street is considered a front yard. What's interesting is, and if you look at the page that has the picture of the house on East Wisconsin Street, so it's the page 1 of 2. If you look down right underneath that house, and it's coincidentally one of the homes that's looking to build a garage on a corner lot, a detached garage. You'll see the definition from city ordinance, and it identifies your front lot line, which establishes your front yard. And in the bold in the middle, it says, in the case of corner lots, the primary front lot line is that property line most parallel to the street from which access is gained. The secondary front lot line is the other lot line with street frontage. So in the ordinance or in the definition, it starts to get at identifying a front yard and another front yard as being different somehow. But in our ordinances, there is no practical application of that difference. And when I say that, there's communities like Clintonville, Thiensville, Prairie du Sac. Clintonville will take your front yard, your primary front yard, and they will have a setback of 25 feet for your primary front yard. That would be a primary front yard setback as it looks like it's described in our ordinance. Clintonville goes a little bit further and then identifies the secondary lot or secondary yard, and they give it a reduced setback down to 20 feet. So there, they say you have a front yard that has 25 feet and you have a side yard or a street side yard that's different and the setback then is reduced. In our ordinances, we start to get at that differentiation between a primary and a secondary, but our setbacks only say that a front in the R1 and R2 zoning districts, the front setback is 25 feet. And so what that means is no matter if you have a primary or a secondary yard, the setback in our current ordinance is 25 feet. That being said, our ordinances go a little bit further to say that for accessory buildings or detached garages, you cannot build them in the front yard. In the case of Ms. Hilscotter's home, because it fronts on 3 different streets, you could interpret that to mean that there are 3 front yards, and if you can't build a detached garage or an accessory building in a front yard, basically there's 3 yards that by current ordinance wouldn't allow you to build a garage unless you tucked it in her situation. There's a backyard or a side yard and it has a pool in it already. So in that case, there's a little bit of an issue there with where a garage could go. But what we talked about a year and a half ago at the ordinance committee was perhaps you build on this primary and secondary front yard. And maybe there's an exception that could be made for accessory buildings to maybe not be allowed in a primary front yard, but maybe in a secondary side yard. I think you will see on page 1 of 17, there were 4 or 5 recommendations that were passed to the ordinance committee in January of 2014. The very first one says, let's expand on what it means to have a front yard and a front yard that is different on a corner lot. Number two, then, just to follow up a little bit on what I said earlier, is if you set aside a street side yard or a lot that's different, you would probably have to have an actual setback that applies to that side yard, if you would choose to do that. Number three then is we sort of built on number 1 and 2 and said if you're going to identify one yard as being different, and if you're going to consider a setback for that yard as being a different setback, perhaps you could consider coming down to a minimum of 15 feet. Or at least 20 feet, and the discussion back then was, they looked at how long a car might be for parking purposes. Number 4 then gets at the current language we have that prohibits a accessory building from being in any front yard. And that maybe if you have a yard that's different, you could allow for a garage or a building to be in that yard. Number 5 then would be something of a clarification that when we're looking at setbacks, setbacks are measured from the property line, and the property line isn't the curb. And you'll run into that quite often where people will think the setback is from the curb. And at the time, the committee had talked about maybe a clarification in the ordinance that just said, just as a reminder, setback is from your property line. I do have a blue note on there. The handwriting on that sheet is just the updated. Take a look at page 12 in here. Or on page 1 where I have the picture of the East Wisconsin Street home, that's where it differentiates a primary and secondary front yard. That's about where we're at. The thing that's changed from January 2014 is that I believe we've got 4 properties in town that have a corner lot of some kind. They're looking to build a garage, and you have obviously a picture of 216 East Wisconsin Street. That's where the Schneiders own that home now. They had a garage on a pad, and the garage burned down. The prior owners did not rebuild it within the year that the ordinance allows. And so what they'd like to do is rebuild a garage there. Because it wasn't rebuilt within a year, they have to follow the 25-foot setback, because again, every front yard right now has a 25-foot setback. The other one would be 301 East South Street. That is a property owned by Dennis Yorkson. Right now they don't have a garage on a corner lot. What they would be looking to do is to add a garage that would be attached to the house, but the problem is they don't have 25 feet of setback to the west, and I believe that's Merrimack Street that they're along. The third one that we have is Hill Scotters, which is 301 South Mary. There is, in the packet of 17 sheets, page 17 lays out a little bit of the discussion from a year and a half ago on what they were looking to do on their lot. And there's 2 others that had called and said they have corner lots, they'd like to look into a garage, but they also knew that at some point the ordinance committee was going to take a look at this. And so they wanted to sort of see what was going to happen with that. And the reason why you're here tonight is because ultimately the Plan Commission gets to review your zoning code. But in speaking with Attorney Kelly and knowing he was going to be here for your animal and ethics ordinance discussion tonight, he had mentioned that because the Plan Commission, when they meet, there's notice requirements that have to be put out when they review the zoning code. There is some requirement that anything that goes to the Plan Commission is recommended by the City Council for review. And so the way that would go is a committee of the City Council would meet, potentially make a recommendation to the full City Council. The full City Council then would vote on that recommendation, but their vote wouldn't be final to change the ordinance. What their vote would be is to recommend to the Plan Commission to review whatever the recommendation would be. It gets sent to the Plan Commission, and that's assuming that there's a positive vote and a majority vote on whatever the recommendation is. Goes to the Plan Commission then makes recommendation back to the full City Council, and then the full City Council then, after getting a recommendation from the Plan Commission, could take a vote on your ordinances. So step 1 is a committee of the City Council. We're here at the Ordinance Committee. One of the only other issues that's maybe out there to be decided is when you look at page 1 again, so we'll go back to the 216 East Wisconsin Street. We'll go back to that bold language in red that I've got highlighted there. On a corner lot, all 3 of the homes and addresses we just talked about face different ways. A front door will face to one street, an address may be on one street, and a garage may be on one street as well. So all 3 of those, you don't have 2 that are the same. On Mary Street, you have the front door faces to the north, the address is to the east, and the driveway is to the east. On Wisconsin Street, you have the front door and the address being to the same street, to Wisconsin, but the garage facing to East Street. And in the case of the South Street home, the Orkson property, everything faces to the north, and it all faces on South Street. The reason why that's important is because when you look at the red bold language, it says the primary front lot line is that property line most parallel to the street from which access is gained. So if you would set a front yard and a yard that is different than the front yard, the problem with our ordinance is the short sentence there that says to the street from which access is gained. Well, is access your front door, your driveway, your garage? We don't really have anything that hammers that out. So in potentially reviewing setbacks, one of the things you'll want to address as well is what does that mean? What's the determining factor to figure out a front yard? And Attorney Kelly, I think, has some comments on it. There's other communities that sometimes leave it up to the building inspector. Well, at that, you'd hope you still have a standard, that it's not just up to whoever to determine. And again, all 3 of these properties are a little bit different with front doors and addresses and garages too. So that's got a couple different things to look at. Again, most of the information in this packet is what was sent to the ordinance committee a year and a half ago, and at the time they chose not to move it forward, but that does not mean that some of these things aren't relevant. I think every one of these items is relevant and should be addressed or reviewed or both.
All right, guys, say something. When you get to set what you just said, which access is gained, neither the house on Wisconsin or the Hillscotter house have access on the side they want to build. Neither one of them have a door on that side of the house. So that definitely cannot be claimed to be the access side, because there's not even a door on the house. So, and actually the one on, what is that, Summit Street? You said?
South.
That one doesn't have a door on that side either. So the access point has to be to the front or the immediate rear. And so the setback from the side we're talking about has no relevant value to access the house.
Yeah, it would be a secondary front lot. It
Yeah.
wouldn't be the primary.
Yeah, it can't be,
And
yeah.
that probably is the best argument, that,
Yeah.
where your door faces, they're probably talking pedestrian access,
Yeah.
because back when these things were first put together, there might not have been as much vehicular access, or the vehicular access was almost always the same place as pedestrian.
Yeah,
Here you have a couple situations, though, where you might have the vehicular access being different from the pedestrian access. It's a little messy when it's just, we should probably say pedestrian access if that's what we mean.
and another thing is, that's very confusing, and nobody knows why it is, but Kay's house address is on Mary Street instead of the front of the house, and there's no access to that house on Mary Street whatsoever. There's not even a door on the side of the house. But
There's-
some
yeah.
place way back when, that's where they put her mailing address. And why that happened, I don't know. And in fact, right across the street from her is a house that's the same situation. And that house is, the garage is on Mary Street, and the house address is Parker Street. And their garages, where they exist right now, are just right across the street from each other. So right there, our old municipal rules here are conflicting with each other right to begin with, you know?
Or at least the way they were put in. You know, it would have depended when that address was given, if it was an
Right.
approved lot, I
Yeah,
don't know.
why did she get an address, you
Yeah.
know? Maybe it had something to do with the way they delivered mail back then, I don't know, you know, but,
Or where they were an improvement,
yeah.
the older ones.
If I could say something, what shed, which is referred to as a shed because it's not a garage. I can't even park my car in it. Used to be a horse stable. So,
That could
you
be
know,
why
it
too.
made sense to put your horses in the back of your yard versus the front of your yard.
Yeah.
So, just-
Oh, behind your house.
Yeah,
And in
behind
that-
your house.
And in that situation, it
Right.
is.
And I just want to point out one other thing too with the South Street house, just because I am so familiar with it. It has, the back of the house has a patio door, and the side where the cars are, it does have a door there. You just can't see it because the van is
It
parking
does.
there. And then the front
Oh,
is
there's
a
one
front
there,
door.
okay.
Yeah.
There is a front door on the front?
There is a front door because
On
he,
the front,
yeah,
front.
front, yep.
And a side door on the side.
And a side door.
Yeah.
And so the nice thing about that is it looks like in all of our examples at least, we're talking about secondary
Right,
front yards.
right.
You know, under the most logical application of what we have right now. Other interesting thing is, the Gunderson, who is the one that brought this issue up last time? Yerkman, was it?
No, it was with, a year and a half ago, I was with the Hillscatter home, which
Oh,
is
it
on
was,
the East
okay.
Mary Street. Yep,
Okay,
yep.
okay, so that would have brought up to the notion of whether you can build in a secondary front yard. What's unfortunate about the way your code's drafted right now is it really doesn't seem to permit an accessory
No,
building in that
that's-
secondary yard. And I don't know if that's what was really intended.
That part of it applies to the Mary Street home, but I think it also applies to on South Street because
Yeah, I think it ought to
where
go.
the house sits now, where you would build the garage is technically, it makes sense to build it where they would look to build it. But if the letter of the law is between the street and the house, that's your front yard, well, in a way, that's the front yard, the way the ordinances are currently drafted.
You know, this was, Nick, you must have been there when we redid the square footage for garages, were you on that?
No.
Well, anyway, we ran into the same basic problem with garages. The rule we had in our books was so outdated, nobody could build a building over 100 square feet. Well, you know, some people have 1, 2, or 2.5 lots in town, and by the way it was written at that time, you couldn't put up much more than a garden shack. And then we went through the whole thing and redid it, that it ended up going by the square footage of your lot, determine the size of a garage you could put up, all the way up to a 3-car garage, depending if you had big enough yard, which it made a lot of sense, we've had no trouble with it. Now this comes up, it's the same basic situation. The rule is a little archaic, and all of the involved ones, and a couple of the newer ones that have been asking, I spent the last 2 days with a tape measure, measuring and measuring and measuring, and the bottom line is 15 feet would solve all those problems and ease a lot of headaches for quite a few people, including us. And I don't think the 15, dropping from 25 to 15 is out of line. I see some of the examples in here at 8 feet, which I wouldn't agree with 8 feet, that's too close. But 15, and I measured a bunch of cars today too. If you're gonna go back 15 feet, you can still park in front of the garage and be off the right-of-way. And by that I mean the sidewalk.
Right, so
That's so that you're not parking
you're
with your
looking
tail
at
end hanging
15
out on
feet
the
from
road.
where the sidewalk would be,
Yeah,
correct? So
right.
go back whatever the setback is,
15
Yeah,
feet
usually-
ten
from the
feet or
sidewalk.
whatever it is,
Yeah,
10
usually.
feet off the curb, 15 feet off that.
I was looking around
Well, I'm-
with Patrick today, and that's an interesting thing. It usually is a sidewalk, but you have varying widths of streets here quite a bit. And a couple times I said, that's right off the sidewalk, and Patrick would say, oh, no, not in this one. It's in a little further, because I thought, the one, Yorkman, I think it was, my initial thought was, we're probably okay here.
And then you look at the road and.
But when you look at where the setback actually falls, where the lot line actually falls, and you have to measure it off the lot line.
Well, today I went to Kay's house, she out tape measured for me, but I measured from the center of the road, 30 feet back.
Yep, which is the right of way.
And it does come right to the edge of the sidewalk.
That's usually the way it is.
Yeah,
Or 6
exactly
inches.
right, it didn't, it came right out to where, and then 4 foot for the right of way. And then the 15 feet gave her plenty of room to put her garage up and still be within the limits of what the rule would say if we change it to 15 feet. And the one on Wisconsin Street, I really don't know how to handle that one. Because that's not 15 feet, then the law always said if it burns down, you can rebuild it in the same footprint, and, but
In a
we got
year,
two
yeah.
different owners here,
Yeah,
so.
yeah, you do have the two, they actually, we were talking about that too, they actually had the best shot at a variance.
Yeah.
Because of the timing of it all,
Yeah.
it burned down,
Yeah.
the other people didn't decide to replace it, well, they have it now.
Yeah,
And there's even a practical difficulty argument for them, because they'd have to add another 4 feet. That's all
Yeah.
they'd have to do, of raise it up and add some more. Come on,
Add 4.
practically, does that make sense under these circumstances? So at least they'd have a fighting chance. The other ones for variance, I'm not sure,
yeah,
are gonna be able to beat practical difficulty and necessary hardship under the normal standard.
yeah, yeah.
So they would need some sort of ordinance change. Well, I think Patrick's pointed this out pretty well. If you were going to do this, you'd have to address two things. First of all, the setback, as we're talking about, for the secondary front yard. And then you're gonna have to permit accessory buildings to allow detached garages. In the one circumstance, you didn't have that issue because it's gonna be attached to the house, so that wouldn't be an accessory building. But in the other two, you would have an issue where you're building an accessory building.
Yeah.
So you'd have to amend both, if you were gonna do that.
Nick, say something, you got any idea?
Well, not sure 15 feet is back far enough, but we gotta allow something on the secondary side.
Yeah.
Assuming first I think we should somehow try to get in writing what is primary and what is secondary also.
You gotta do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why you're gonna, if you are to say that, that would be the real important distinguishing factor, is the fact that you can put something in the secondary
Right.
front setback.
No matter where you're going down, you're gonna have somebody on a corner lot, I mean,
I have a corner lot,
you know, they're all, yeah, you have a corner lot, yeah.
you know, and I consider, well, I don't use my front door. So my primary one is off East Street, but my street address is 301 East Main Street. And if I have emergency services, that's the address I'm giving them, that's the one they're going to. So I've always assumed that was the primary, just
Yeah.
because of that.
How does this language work? This is the language I grew up with and I'm most familiar with. On a corner lot, the front lot line shall be along the same street as the lot line of the immediately adjacent interior lot. Or if adjacent to 2 or more interior lots, the street frontage with the smallest dimension
Would be the front.
would be the
Big
front.
yeah.
Well, that
Yeah,
would
that's
make
the
sense.
classic that I'm used to, the latter. I like that first language though, too, if you have an interior lot to
Right.
judge it against.
Right.
You want them to be uniform in the front. That's
Right.
for street appeal. So
That would,
I thought that was pretty good language. Although,
better than what
the
we
access
have.
language,
Right.
by inserting the word pedestrian access, we straighten that issue up too. And it's nice and clear. Where your front door is,
Yeah,
would then be your
That
front door.
front door, yeah.
that would seem to make sense.
So either way you guys would want to go, that's just a couple options.
And that would make Mary your secondary.
Yeah.
Marry my secondary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That would seem to make sense, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. UPS actually has my address listed on both Sumner Street and Mary Street. So
Because
they're
that's a
real-
classic way to do it.
They're real confused when they come to my house because they don't know where to go.
Yeah, they might think it's a two-apartment job or something. huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, the double corners are always a little confusing, but that's a very logical way to do it. They just looked at the shortest frontage
Right.
on both corners, and they gave it addresses for UPS purposes.
Yeah.
Well, I like the language of that there. It's by far better than what we have right now.
It is, it's clear. I think that's out of Green Bay, and there was one other that had almost identical language. So that's why I took that as an example. The other one is just let your building inspector decide.
Yeah.
But your building inspector could become a very unpopular guy very
Real
quickly.
fast.
If you did that.
I'd rather have something a little more
Yeah.
set than that, and just arbitrary.
Usually you'll list some factors for them, but
If you wouldn't mind me speaking, 15 feet of work will work good in our yard. 20 feet, we're gonna be right on top of the deck. And the problem with that is the door in the back is on the very, very east corner of my house. So I couldn't reduce the deck because then everything would be inside the garage. 15 feet, I can shorten up what I originally planned on doing. And it's sort of meeting in the middle of what we had proposed to start out with and what is really reasonable for us to be able to do.
Yeah, to add on that a little bit, so in January 2014, the setback on that side on Mary was 25 feet. And what they were looking to do, I think, was, it was gonna result like in a 9-foot setback
Yeah.
back then.
I guess, obviously, I know I can't make a motion on this committee, but that's what I would like to see, is a motion to reduce that from 25 to 15 feet, and use the words that our legal beagle here says, and get it corrected and take care of several problems in town. And I don't think we're going out outrageously changing anything. We're just making it more convenient for John Q. Citizen and probably
Yeah.
several other people.
And I agree with Jack on it only because my husband's parents had a problem, this last month. My father-in-law not knowing that you needed to go and get a building permit and all this other stuff went and put a deck on their house, and it wasn't, anything fancy. It wasn't attached to the house. Somebody ended up turning them in, and we had a big uproar. My mother-in-law was quite upset. My husband was quite upset because my mother-in-law was disabled. So, I understand the fact of giving a little bit, of leniency on things to have people be able to have, because, it's their yard, it's their property. They should have a little say, but still go with the rules of the city and the ordinances. So I agree totally with Jack on, working out something and cleaning up the language, and it would solve some of our headaches in our city. I don't know how Nick feels, but I agree with that, and I think we should clean it up a little bit and make it better.
and where you folks seem to be heading, I'm not sure what you're gonna do with the distance in the setback in the secondary front yard, but you would need to make 3 amendments then. If you want to amend the primary front yard language to refer to the corner lot, the front lot shall be along the same street as the lot line immediately adjacent to an interior, or if adjacent to 2 or more, the street frontage with the smallest dimension, or maybe just go to smallest dimension. You guys can just, again, I've seen that done. Then you also have to set the setback that you're going to apply to a secondary front yard.
Very loud.
And then you're going to have to allow accessories within the secondary
Right.
front yard. So you got to do those 3 things to go in the direction you guys are talking. Anything else you can think of? We'll make it
No, that-
clear on all this
I
as
think that
measured
would
from lot line.
clear up a lot of it, that's for sure.
That pretty much covers in those 3 points,
What-
pretty
what
much
you're
everything that
talking
we,
about.
some of our ordinance started to get at, but never really followed
Yeah.
through on, you know. Yeah.
Good party back there.
Yeah, must be. Getting hit by boulders.
No, you're not upset.
Jody, you can't use your outside bar dice anymore.
The only thing I can see with just calling it the smallest yard is then if you had a house that was really built sideways, you could end up a corner lot, if they built like a ranch home and they turned like this, you would put their front yard down and the side of their house. So I'd like to say it's still
You like that
with the next
next
interior,
lot.
yeah.
You may even have that with, it's hard to tell because these are, to blow these pictures up.
Who you thinking?
It's a little bit hard, the South Street Yorksons. Because the
because-
depth of the lot isn't real deep and the house is longer, but it's.
Right.
Where on Mary Street in Wisconsin, the front door faces the smallest street
Right.
frontage and then the side is longer, obviously.
Right, but if you took it,
And if you went
if
to
you
the
included
next
that,
lot,
you'd have Sheeney's house next door, so that would make their front yard on South Street.
And that's if you're not just taking the shortest.
Right,
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 right.
you'd have to do both.
Yep.
You'd
That's
have
why
to
you're
do both.
saying you like
Yep,
both.
Yep, because that way we just eliminate that problem. So I would make a motion to go with that definition of a front yard. For
How-
everything the attorney stated before. I'm not gonna
Yeah,
repeat.
whatever you just said.
Yeah, the corner lot, the front lot line shall be along the same street as the front lot line of the immediately adjacent interior lot. Or if adjacent to 2 or more interior lots, the street frontage shall be the smallest dimension. We could simply, how about if we state, or if not, if there isn't an interior lot, it'll be the street with the,
Shortest frontage,
Yeah.
or,
yeah, shortest frontage, because then you're covering your double frontage lots too.
Yeah.
Okay? That way we got, okay.
I've got a question,
Yeah.
and you made a motion, right? Maybe we'll wait on seconding, but the question I've got is, so if they're recommending this ultimately to the plan commission, and they're looking at 3 different items to address, does it make sense that it's one motion to cover all 3, or 3 motions that individually set? Because
Actually,
it's a little weird that it goes to the council and then they recommend it back to the plan commission to review again, and.
yeah, and it really is pretty much a referral to plan commission. Because even if plan commission denies, you still get it back. If plan commission doesn't do anything, it comes back as if approved. So it always comes back to the council. And there's gonna have to be a hearing, I think that's before the council though, for us. I gotta look, I
Yeah.
don't remember. If you break it down into 3, you're kind of giving 3 kicks of the cat. If you keep it all in one, you're kind of sending a package. It might be a better idea to send the package.
Send package,
Comes
okay.
back cleaner.
All right.
Not that they couldn't,
Yeah.
the plan commission separated if they wanted. But if you like that whole package, and it really does ride together. You probably want to make it in one motion.
All right. So the second one was then to allow secondary buildings.
Yep, accessory buildings.
Accessory buildings.
In a secondary front yard.
I'll include that.
And then the tough one, what are you guys gonna do for setback distance? Now, you're not gonna run into
15 feet.
grandfathering problems with that, because everybody's probably longer than 25, at 25, or
Yeah.
you're not gonna have a lot of grandfathering, so we don't have that normal concern when you amend.
Well, you may, because an accessory building, for what she has today, it's like a shed, but it would be an accessory building that's, she's right on the right of way, and I think there's a lot of properties that have a garage already, or some kind of building that's closer than the 25 feet probably. But what they have
Yeah, I see what
today,
you're saying. So you
we
might
have
be
language
allowing
though
things
that.
you don't wanna allow.
Well, I think it'd probably be grandfathered in, but if a storm takes them down, I mean, there's some way to address, there's language in the ordinance now that addresses if your garage burns down or your building burns down, you get a year or 6 months or whatever it is, depending on the severity of the damage.
Yeah.
But what this would probably mostly affect would be all brand-new structures that are proposed, or, you know.
Yeah, do all three, and like I say, I can't say nothing, but I'd like to see 15 feet.
Trouble, the only thing I have with 15 feet is that, and I understand for your case, but, you know, my truck's more than 15 feet, which means it would be parking on the sidewalk.
And for 45 years, I've parked in the street and pulled my car in north and south in front of my shed, or on the Mary
On the
side street
sidewalk,
of the
yeah.
shed, because I wouldn't want my vehicle being in somebody's way on the road.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that people,
Well,
most people would use common sense and say, well, that my car doesn't fit here, I need to do something different.
well, right, but I don't, we have it in an ordinance that you can't park on the sidewalk. So then, if we're changing it, then we almost have to change that ordinance too and say, you can park on it, because if I'm telling you,
There is no sidewalk there. As a matter of fact.
but no, but there's a right of way there. And,
I understand.
You know.
On Mary Street, I have a sort of half sidewalk between Sumner and my garage.
Yep.
But it's a private sidewalk. It's not even a city sidewalk. So it's something that owners put in before I owned it.
Right.
So,
What-
yeah, no, I hear you, and I'm not arguing. with
Wondering
you,
if,
so.
you know, because you're recommending to the plan commission, can you get by with a recommendation that just says in the secondary setback, it would just be reduced? And then you leave it up to the plan commission to review and set what they think, 15 or 20? You know, maybe your recommendation here could be consider a reduced setback compared to the primary front yard.
okay, and then if
But
planning
it's up
commission
to you
doesn't
guys.
act, then it comes back without a number on it to council again.
Right. That's one reason why some guidance at this point in time of what they're referring is a good idea. I think you're right. I don't think it's essential. Because then what you're doing is you're asking the plan commission to make a recommendation back to the council on these issues. You know, you're outlining the issues and saying we want to change the ordinance here, but we're not sure how. Plan commission, you do it for us. Here you have the opportunity to say to them, this is how we recommend it be done. Let us know if there's something wrong with that. A little different approach.
But like talking with the vehicles and stuff, and I don't know, maybe this isn't right, but, you know, we're talking about the setback being 15 or 20, but we're also talking about, you know, our vehicles not being in the right of way. Could it be in the language where it is more of a common sense? Like if you don't meet the requirements and your vehicle is gonna be hanging off, then it obviously is not gonna be built. I mean, cause, I mean, under here, it's already saying that, you know, when they're building something, it's already telling them that, you know, it's gotta be, you can't be parking on the sidewalk and all that, and then within the driveway and everything. So, I mean, it's just making them clarify that if they're building, to make sure they're looking at their plan, that when they build the garage, that they're not gonna be in any road right away or in any parking lot. Or,
The garage, what you have here is you have a situation where you're creating a potential of using your police reg all the time. If you're going to have too short a setback, you know, people who have longer vehicles, and there are 20-foot vehicles, they're gonna be, they better park in their garage. Because if they park out on their curb, they can be cited by the police. Now, that's a bit of a pain, but, I mean, that's what your rules say. And your rules would allow somebody to be cited if they're on a, you know, if they're across the right of way.
so then that just brings up a whole nother issue with the setback then.
Yeah.
I mean, how often are we gonna see that though with some of the yards? Cause the properties that we're looking at right now aren't really,
Well, I guess, why don't we go back to what Jim said? Just say that you okay with the first two parts and you're recommending the setback number be changed at the discretion of the planning commission.
Yeah. I think,
It's eventually gonna come back to you though.
I think
Yeah,
I'm
it's gonna
okay
come
with
back
that.
anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys
I think
are
I'm okay
gonna wind
with
up
that.
fixing it one way or another.
okay.
Either here or as a board as a whole. In fact, if you wanted to, as part of your recommendation, maybe that's a smart thing to do. The council can discuss that and come up with what they want to refer. If this committee would like to see the council weigh in on that, that's one way to do it.
That may help you get a recommendation going too, because with one member not here,
Mhm,
If-
yeah,
if-
yeah.
both of you can't agree on one number, you might get hung up where you don't have a number to push forward anyway.
I agree with Jack. I think we should let them just come up with a number and go from there.
At full council
Yeah.
or at the plan committee, well, both, I mean, they're both gonna get a kick
Both.
at it,
Yeah,
At full council, we get two.
sure.
right?
Have 3 whacks at it.
So we have roughly, and I can insert the language that he has, but a motion by Gunderson to recommend the city attorney definition of a front lot or front yard. I think we could fill that in. And to allow an accessory building to be built in the secondary front yard on a corner lot.
Yes.
And to consider reduced setback in the secondary yard.
Yes.
And I'll second that.
Okay. So I have your motion. Okay. That would be good. Okay, so your motion, the second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Should do it.
Oh, that's good. Good. So that will go, yep, so that'll go to city council and then city council is on, August 17th.
Got it.
Okay?
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, our next item is discussion and possible action on the vicious animal ordinance revisions.
Just a real quick, I spoke a lot on the last topic, but on this one, you have both of the drafts that were drafted by Attorney Kelly. One is, and Madam Chair, at your recommendation, the draft that went into the last meeting in July, which would have been after you initially met on the vicious animal pit bull ordinance. Attorney Kelly drafted some revisions within some guidelines that were granted by the committee or recommended by the committee. At the last meeting, the discussion you had veered a little bit in a different route, and Attorney Kelly has drafted some revisions to the pet licensing and to the specific ordinance. But so you know, in your packet, you have a 5A and a 5B. The 5A, because it's agenda item number 5, A would be what was presented to you before last meeting, and B is the new revision coming into this meeting. Does that make sense?
Yep.
That'll look confusing because you've got basically the same ordinances with different language and,
Well, we'll figure it out as we go along, I
yep,
think, huh?
yep.
So,
The ordinances look a lot different,
Yes, they do.
but in some respects, they're a lot more similar than you realize. I think there was general agreement that we wanted a good licensing provision where we would take pictures of the dogs and register them, and we wanted to clean that up. You do see that in the second ordinance. And that applies in particular to the vicious animals. So you have the vicious animals being registered. In the second ordinance, that was really the thrust of the first ordinance. The principal difference is in the second ordinance, we put the pit bulls back in and given them separate consideration. Some of the stuff in the second ordinance I'd strongly recommend just because it cleans up the ordinance and it makes it read better. The big difference though is pit bulls is now back. And by the way, there's a couple things we want to clean, we want to be careful about if we do something with the pit bull ordinance. For some reason, when we put that in, we also put other dangerous animals and tied them in, venomous animals, what's the other one?
That was initially, whoever had created the ordinance initially is what you're saying.
Yeah,
That
put
was
that
put-
in.
it was in there.
And you're gonna want to save that, I'm assuming. You guys never talk about changing that. One thing I did say at the last meeting that I want to correct myself on, I thought we could make it pit bulls, Rottweilers, and Shepherds. In Wisconsin, we don't have background for Rottweilers and Shepherds. The only thing that's been proved before the court and that we have a nice record on is pit bulls. So I would recommend that to keep the protection of that precedent, just do it on pit bulls, because there's a whole history of why you can do it for pit bulls and not for any other dogs. So that's why you didn't see Rottweilers being included, in case you guys wondered when you read it through. And then other than that, again, it's essentially a registration provision. The issue that seems to be different in the main issue is that you have reinstated, if you will, the pit bull ordinance in the second, whereas you pulled it out in the first. So you would have the preemptive pit bull type regulation where you're saying that breed is prohibited and has to be registered right away, as opposed to a nice cleaned up ordinance in regard to vicious animals, where you'd have to have the registration for any vicious animal. It's probably going to have some history of biting or attack in order to get vicious animals. And we also have cleaned it up so that all dogs have to be pictured and registered in a little bit cleaner language than we had before.
And a little bit, and I talked to the mayor a little bit about where this started, because it was from last fall. But the current ordinance, and you guys, I'm reminding you, but the current ordinance just straight up outlaws pit bulls completely, unless they were grandfathered in and licensed back in 2010, 2011. And there was somebody that had a pit bull that had not been registered, and they had asked that you revise the ordinance. And so the way ordinance sits today is, if you did not have a pit bull in 2010, or if you had one and you did not license it at any point between then and now, you cannot have a pit bull in the city of Weyauwega. And so the aim at regulating the pit bulls was more of a vicious animal aim, and then what you're trying to do is trying to figure out how best to regulate vicious animals or prevent circumstances,
And then-
that come on by vicious animals or attacks or anything.
So I just want to say, excuse me, I think Jackie, you were trying to say, I just want to go back and just, because I struggled with this after the last meeting. It actually bothered me, and I was in contact with Patrick on it, doing some more research. I apologize because my computer's down at home, so I couldn't get everything that I wanted to, and new job, but I did what I could. So I went, and first thing I did was when we had this brought to us about a year ago, I started looking at ordinances within our county, with our city. With that said, there is no ordinance in any city in Wapaka County that prohibits pit bulls. So that kind of made me happy. I thought, 'cause I'm a dog lover, I love all dogs, I give every dog a chance. The next thing I went is we were comparing, or most people were comparing down to Milwaukee. I didn't feel that was a good place to start because of how pit bulls and gangs and stuff are more prevalent down there. Nothing against the city, but that's how some stuff had coming up. I checked with Green Bay ordinance. I checked with Appleton. I did Wausau. None of them had any pit bull ordinance. It was all vicious animals, because any dog at any time has that potential to do the same amount of damage to somebody, regardless of the breed and the size of them. So when we came in for our last meeting, and I was listening to Nick talk, and I was like, yeah, it makes sense. You're worried about your community, you're worried about the safety. But then when I went back and looked at these ordinances again, if everybody was worried about the safety of dogs, I would have assumed that would have been an issue with every community. So it seems like we're right back to square one again, where we're profiling dogs that do have a potential to be dangerous, but any dog that we have has that potential to be dangerous. Then I went and looked at insurance companies and what they did. Now, it was very interesting because some states say you cannot prohibit insurance to any pit bulls. You have to offer it to it. Obviously, if they do something wrong, then you take the proper call. But there was at least 8 dogs that are recognized for being vicious. And all insurance, this website that I looked at basically summed everything up. Dogs are dogs. You have insurance to protect yourself, and you try to be the most responsible person you can. And that's what I got out of it. So when looking at this, I just thought we were kind of going overboard because we're making more work for ourselves when we've never done that before. Our community's been pretty good. Yeah, we've had a few people who, have issues with their dogs and stuff, but I don't know that any are pit bulls. And I just wanted to get away from profiling the dogs because I don't think it's fair. I think everybody should have a chance. And I know not everybody's going to agree with me on that, but I think we need to just eliminate the pit bull and get back to being a community and knowing each other. I mean, I think with you talking about getting out and meeting your neighbors, if everybody's out talking and getting to know each other, you're gonna get to know their dogs. They're gonna get to know how you feel, and maybe things would be a little bit different. That's what I have to say.
I guess my question would be Jim, if in fact this committee did somehow come up with a recommendation, how have these things been held up in courts?
One of the things that started, probably the reason you guys actually did this a couple of years ago, there was a case down in a Milwaukee suburb
Yeah.
that banned pit bulls.
Yeah.
And
I was
that,
gonna say,
that community did a lot of research and built a heck of a profile, saying that pit bulls, people are afraid of them naturally, they have more of a propensity to bite, and at that time they were also being overbred. This is about a 20-year-old case now. And as a result of that, a lot of communities started, I shouldn't say a lot of them, about 18 communities in Wisconsin have done it. So it's a vast minority, definitely. But the court said, you have a nice clean precedent that says they're legal to do.
yeah,
And so what we did last time, if you recall, we did look at a lot of different ordinances, and we really got into what do you do to declare an animal vicious? And we're taking probably the course of least resistance to get to the vicious level. There's others where you have to bring a dog into the court and all that to declare this vicious. We didn't go that way. If there's any evidence of attack, if off the property, if there's any bite off the property, it's vicious, and then they have to be registered as such.
And
So we have moved in that regard, and then we put in the
Yeah.
insurance provisions.
Yeah, and the one that you presented us before all these changes, if you look at Weyauwega's ordinance, it's almost word for word.
It's very similar. I
The
took some of it.
only difference was the insurance was just, I think they were 50,000 higher than what we had.
And I can boost that,
They're 50,000 higher.
They were $100,000,
and we were 50 or something.
yeah.
I'm good with that. It was a question I had.
Well, I still prefer the second one.
Well, if you guys are loggerheads, maybe we just wait till the other members here.
Gonna have to.
I think so, yeah.
No.
And again, really, we can zero them in on the one difference, because that really is, a lot of what's in the second one, not all the changes in the pit bull ordinance, of course, if we kick it out, but a lot of the other stuff is necessary to get your license provision to where it reads a little cleaner.
And I promise next time to have all my papers for everybody so you can read what I've been reading.
And the goal I would put out there, if we're setting goals, is our dog licensing is January 1st through December 31st. So I agree. I think those will be good changes to licensing with pictures and things like that. But as long as we have it cleaned up and straight away before the end of this year would be perfect, because otherwise we get, so a goal could be that, and I would appreciate that. We're in August, so we've got some time, but,
Hopefully next month.
yep.
So just table the next month, probably, the motion you guys want.
Gonna make a motion to table till next month?
I'll make a motion to table the vicious animal ordinance until next month.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have discussion on city ethics code and ordinance, chapter 47.
We did a little review last month, and I think in general, what you had recommended to Attorney Kelly was maybe we just need to start over with drafting an ethics code, and I know he's working on it.
I started
Yeah.
picking away at it, and as I was doing it, I've drafted 4 of these in the time that I've been an attorney. It's not something you turn over a lot, but the last one I did was for the Village of Swamico, and their ethics board went nuts. I mean, they spent a long time going through it and really pounded through it, and they talked about each issue. I was going to give you 2 examples. One is the De Pere Code. I think it's 3 pages. Very short, very basic, referring to the state statutes a lot. Has nothing on what the specifics of the procedures are going to be. Just that the Finance Committee, which I don't think is a good idea, by the way, the Finance Committee will be our Board of Ethics, which is kind of ugly if it's one of you, because then you can't even be excluded from those meetings when they go into closed session. Not a good idea. So anyhow, the Swamico ordinance is what I'd like to pass out to you folks, and then make sure we get a copy to the other member. And I'd like you guys to look at it. As I said, what we did when we put that ordinance together is we looked at every one of the typical aspects. I mean, what you should have in an ethics code, you want to refer to the state ethics provisions, criminal provisions, and that's going to require you to have some definitions. Then you want to have the fair and equal treatment statement that basically says that all of you are going to make sure that all of your citizens are treated fairly and equally. Then you're going to have some stuff out of the state ethics code modified to fit your particular needs, the conflict stuff and your disclosure provisions, the way you want to deal with them. Then you're going to then I think you should have a significant portion talking about how is your board going to be constituted, and how is a complaint going to be made? What's going to have to be in the complaint? Now, Swamico got very particular. They wanted a verified complaint. You could ask them to post a bond if they're going to make an ethics complaint. That was a big issue that was debated quite a bit. To keep the flies off, so people aren't just trying to cause trouble. They have to come forward with a legitimate claim. And then the last but not least, you're going to want to have a provision for confidential advisory procedures. So if you guys run into something you're not sure of, you can request, there's a procedure for requesting it, so that I give you a procedure, just like the AG does for the state. And those are all covered in here, and I'm not saying that's the best way to cover it, but I like the fact that they discussed it all, and I'd like to get you guys started on thinking about it. Maybe we kind of start walking through that as an example, and we save a little drafting time, other than me just trying to create something out of thin air, guessing it you guys are going to like. So, again, I think this is a pretty good starting point.
Good.
Okay.
So I ask you guys to take a look at that, we'll get together again, and then let's start walking through it, if that's a procedure you guys are okay with. We'll
I
start
think so.
walking through it, and we can
Yeah.
start doctoring it out next time we get together.
Okay.
Perfect.
Awesome. All right. Okay, the next on our agenda is discussion and possible action on appointed public officials ordinance.
We talked about this briefly last time we got together. We haven't, what really prompted this was the,
We have an opening in Public Works, and what we're looking to do at the Public Works meeting next week is to talk about reinstating a supervisory position. and the supervisor has not been filled for 4 years, but that position showed up within the appointed officials, and that's how we started chatting about the ordinance itself and how it's appointed. It's,
Yeah, and I've got to say, fine and good to have an employee who's directing your public works, you probably want to do that. Do you want to call him an officer? If you call him an officer, you run the risk of giving that person Chapter 17 protections. That means a for-cause removal and things like that. I don't think you want to do that. As a rule, you want to have, like we have for everybody else, they serve indefinitely at the pleasure of the council. As an employment guy predominantly, I gotta tell you, that's why I'd like to see you folks to have it. And you'll notice attorney, I have indefinite at pleasure of council. Now, personally, I would make a recommendation that in some circumstances, that language might be.
yeah.
No, but
It's never the
seriously,
pleasure.
but seriously, that is the best way to do it. And I don't think you should add officers above and beyond the state, the ones that are in the statutes generally. The other thing that was disconcerting was your chief of police, you had the wrong removal procedure. Chief of police is always protected under 6213, not a thing we can do about it. That's the way it is under the state statutes. And then last but not least, I think you do want your building inspector to be also an officer, because it refers to the duly appointed building inspector in the statutes for things like condemnation orders. So you want to make sure that's an official. And the assessor also has to be. So.
One other piece you did have was the how appointed, because for the
Oh, that's right.
attorney, the administrator, and I believe it was the chief of police, our current ordinance had said all 7 of the council, including the mayor, had a vote. And elsewhere in your ordinances, the mayor has a vote when there's a tie, when it's 3-3.
And by statute. And that was the problem. You know, sorry about this, Mayor, but you're only supposed to vote in ties. And when the statute says that, if you're gonna change it, you could. But it would have to be by a charter ordinance. We wouldn't be able to do it by regular ordinance. And I had no indication that our old ordinance was a charter ordinance, which means it was probably invalid.
Right.
In that regard.
So the modification he has in there obviously is how appointed affirmative vote of the council rather than having 4 of the 7, including the mayor.
That's the other thing. Chapter 17 says that if a person is appointed by the mayor and then approved of by the council, it's a for-cause position. And that would take precedence. These people would be for cause. So, you know, there's all kinds of reasons you want to straighten this up, and that's the way we got this straightened out. Item C is another one that I've made a change to. The language that you had before was frankly just confusing. I wasn't sure what it was saying. And it expanded your duty to give legal representation, at least arguably beyond what it should be, what it is under the statute. Here, we're just saying that city officers will be entitled to legal representation and the cost of legal representation if proceeded against in their official capacity for acts done within the scope of their employment. And then the council can ask the city attorney to represent them, both right out of the statutes. So you're not doing anything the statute doesn't say, you're just acknowledging it here.
Part of the existing ordinance goes further than you needed to, but also part of that didn't go far enough, because I also think it said city officers may be entitled to legal representation, and as part of your duties as an officer, you are covered by the city,
If
you know,
you're
in most
official
cases.
capacity,
Yeah, right.
You're covered. It's,
Where before it
right
said
out
you
of
may
statute.
be, and that's,
so let's see if there's anything else. I think that was pretty much it, right?
yeah.
So, and then, of course, we eliminated the position of whatever it was, assistant
Supervisor of Public
supervisor of
Works.
Public Works. Item C on the second page is something you want to make sure you keep in there, because you have to do that by ordinance, or those positions, offices are set to exist, so we eliminated the engineer, street commissioner, and board of public works. And that's pretty much, that's the body of it at least.
care of.
So then we just need a motion to approve it.
Or recommend approval if you see fit.
I'll recommend approval for the appointed public officials ordinance.
I'll second it.
We do not, so we don't have it numbered yet, because you had the ethics and you got a lot of ordinances hanging out there, and, you know, if we started numbering number 1, 2, 3, 4, and you take 4 first and 1 is hold up, because it seems like this is the first one that'll come out of here, we'll have that 2015, I don't think it's number 1, but, you know, it'll fall into line there.
Right.
So we'll have it numbered.
Okay.
That's just the clarification there, that there'll be a number to it. But
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion Appleby, second Gunderson?
Yep. Hey, there's only 2 of us.
Well, I
All
didn't write down which
unanimous
one though.
votes today. You guys really have it together. Even when you disagree, we have a unanimous vote. That's pretty good.
All right, such other matters as authorized by law? I don't have anything, do you, Nick?
Nope, nothing.
All right, you? No? Make a motion to adjourn the meeting,
I'll second it.
At what time?
7:08.
Still gotta take a vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.